Hi, folks, and welcome to the next podcast. This one is a repeat of a speech I gave at the Experiology conference in December. It's entitled, as you can see, Where It's All Going, and it's a commentary across a range of sports at the moment, where they are going both in design trends and commercially. So let's go. So let's start with football and football stadium development and current trends and what's happening. Well, certainly safe standing. There is a movement Europe wants to stand, which is pretty much European wide, and it's a hardcore of fans who want to return to the standing life. And there are obviously a number of clubs that do stand perpetually and are quite famous for it and get away with doing that within the UEFA and club system. But this is trying to be regularized. UEFA have instigated something called the UEFA Standing Facilities Observer Programme, where they're trying to codify and create a set of standards to accept that standing in stadiums is safe. And they've been observing games at the top flight in England, Wales, France, Germany, Scotland, and Netherlands, and basically accepted that, subject to physical and stewarding quality, these countries and clubs within these countries can stand. Still under observation are Spain, Italy, Belgium, Austria, and Portugal, which of course they also hope to join the permitted group. All seated is considered to be unjustified and outdated by the proponents of standing, and as long as the stadium is designed correctly, this would be true. So where are we in the UK? Well, in the Premier League, pretty much every one of the clubs has already got some form of safe standing in place. This is typically a seat rail, where the seat is a flip down option or can be secured away. Particularly relevant at the moment because UEFA has not yet agreed to completely standing. So the seat flip down option gives the clubs that flexibility. But you can see here that most have it or are already considering it. At the next level down, still there's a pretty fair number here that have standing, and the only ones that really aren't considering it in red is not to do with attitude, it's about the basic configuration of the stadium being unsuitable for it. So what about retrofit of this, which is what's happening in most stadiums, not too many bespoke new build at the top level. And so we're talking about installing rails within existing seated terraces. So are we talking about a one-for-one in place or a return to packed terraces? Well, let's just look at that. The diagram on the left here is typical stadium density, which is about 2.5 people per square metre. If you were to be in a safe standing terrace configuration in accordance with the Green Guide, you could achieve 3.6 or even up to 4.7 people per square metre, which is effectively double the capacity. So many clients come to us with a quite tempting notion that they could put almost twice as many people into the stands if it was converted to terracing. But the key thing, of course, is the support areas. Typically, stadiums are built to the limit, and it's very rare that there is spare concourse, concession, exit widths, toilet facilities, and stair widths to support much more than the existing capacity. So, although reverse back to a standing philosophy is attractive, it's not really a commercial proposition because typically you're doing one for one. It's more an attitude and giving the fans the experience they want. So, on experience, what is going on? Well, everything's fan centric, as we know. Fan experience is the buzzword of the moment. And in the world of hospitality, formal dining is falling away dramatically, and casual food and beverage offers are increasing enormously. There's a trend away from the classic fine dining, the three-course white linen, and much more casual street food, and the rise of the premium GA offer. Within the basic concourses, things are improving dramatically. The traditional, really grim 10 strong deep queues to a concession are fading. Frictionless, cash free Vending is very much coming in. I think most clubs are trialing one or two of these. They're incredibly effective, and I think will become the norm. There are bastions, of course, classic hospitality in the traditional sense. Wembley is a good example of this, but then it has always attracted a significantly corporate crowd and a corporate sponsorship. So it's understandable this sort of dining, which is a high proportion of seated compared to standing, would still exist. External fan zones are definitely on the rise. These are pre-turnstile fan experience areas where they can arrive a couple of hours before the game and stay several hours after the game. Brighton has one called the Terrace. The Stack is famous at the Castle, and they are appearing throughout. And they have an incredible spend pattern and are very popular. You have live bands, as you can see, and they are streaming the early games, the late games, and all other parallel sports. So, next one, of course, is the much constantly commented upon race to the 60,000 club, as we would call it. This sort of threshold driven by UEFA financial fair play, where clubs are seeking to achieve the best possible matchday revenue, both in ticket sales and, of course, peripheral sales. There are only 5 clubs in that membership at the moment, but we're all aware of the others that are chasing hard. Um, we know that Manchester City is well advanced with plans to extend its capacity to over 60. And throughout the last decade, I think Chelsea has announced various plans to achieve the same effect of 60 plus. Arsenal, in the news relatively recently, was talking about a move from 60 to 80,000. Well, such a thing has not been seen in the press as a realistic design, but certainly it would be a roof-off scenario. And if you were to use the dear old power of Mid-Journey AI and were to type in an 80,000 Arsenal, you can see, there you go. There's a ready-made design for you. And until Foster's unveiled their three-point tented structure recently, you could get a pretty good 90,000 Man United stadium in a few seconds. So let's talk about technology, not the AI particularly, although AI is particularly relevant in an automated empathizing customer experience, but general use of technology and how to balance that with fans feeling they're still getting the human engagement. Well, technology is fantastic, and it is helping, as I mentioned, with pre-turnstile fan zones, which are a complete immersive digital world, cashless, frictionless vending. There are increasingly integration of data and access to data and peripheral multi-sport experiences within the core sport of football, and the accessibility for disadvantaged group or disabled groups just gets better and better. The full integrated augmented reality and virtual reality and AI enhanced smart stadiums, I think, still yet to really come into play. We're not really seeing this as an effective medium, but you can think it was only a matter of time. So conclusions, trends in Stadia, definite shift towards safe standing, pretty much guaranteed for the core supporters behind the goals. Trending to more casual F&B, tech overlay continuing, of course, external fan zones, and the 60k capacity drive. Training centres. What's going on with these? Well, training centres are becoming major developments in their own right. They are now commanding budgets which used to be in the realms of new stadia. And this, of course, is because this is the engine room of any club's success. This is the 9 to 5 home of the team, the coaches, the managers. This is where the work gets done. This is where the performance standards are honed. And there are some superb examples throughout the Premier League and ongoing development. It is all about marginal gains, although that's not professed in those terms exactly, but it is about honing every last possible aspect of fitness, performance, nutrition. And this is done through a variety of technologies. And I think in the training centres that we are designing at the moment, it's fair to say that most every aspect of fitness recovery and rehabilitation technology is being employed in some form by most every club. And we're talking some pretty extreme elements here, including MRI suites as well. There are less obvious aspects to the typical hydrotherapy, cryotherapy, hyperbaric. And nutrition is massive, complete control of a player's nutrition throughout the working day, starting with breakfast, continuing analysis and tracking and databases for every last element of a player's fitness, and aspects of fitness monitoring and pre-programmed and personalized fitness and nutrition programs are absolutely given. Wellness and spa and the whole player development, uh, attention to rest periods as much as attention to physical exercise periods. It's a complete wraparound um, service and analysis. So, generally, in training centers, apart from that plethora of technology, there are two main things going on at the moment. One is a focus on the whole player, and I'm not just talking physical, this is more the mental development, and one is an increasing commercialization. Touch on the first one. Mental health is becoming a big factor in the club's awareness of their players' performance. It's a long and grueling season, and it's a high pressure season. Training centres are not just dealing with tactical and performance and athletic potential, they're starting to major on psychological support and mental fitness beyond just match toughness. Mental health is a big issue amongst elite athletes. The continued pressure to perform at the high level and to not fail, and obviously the incredibly competitive atmosphere. But this begins in the academies. The academies is where this pressure starts. When you have girls and boys of 8 to 18 years old, already, even at the very early stages, feeling the pressure to succeed, or of course, they will be cut from the system. Academies are completely immersive. Sometimes the boys and girls are living away from home. They're having to cope with stresses and injuries, sometimes alone without the family support. And it can be a particularly stressful time. So there's an interesting quote here. Academy children engage in elite sport primarily as athletes and secondarily as children. And when you're 8, 9, 10, 11, that feels like the wrong bias. So social development, well-being, mental health are coming in apace. There are 12,500 boys and girls in academy programs in the UK at any one time. That's an awful lot, effectively receiving their childhood and a lot of their schooling in the football academy system. So the whole player development program deals with these aspects that you can see on the screen here. And this goes beyond just the academy boys and girls. This actually is offered to all of the staff and the coaches. Um, they have flexible learning as opposed to rotated. They have a more structured and enriched social and educational life wrapped around the core football training. So things are really improving in this field. Commercialization, well, training centres used to be pretty private domains, and to some extent, they largely are, certainly at the elite level. The aspects of how the players are developing, potential injuries they may have, and potential tactical set piece training, etc., are all highly secretive. But there is a big element of inviting in commercial elements and sponsorship, and particularly social media. Um, we are looking at a number of situations where we have TV studios, green screen studios, a lot of pressure to create Instagram and maintain Instagram and Facebook, and the players are getting a credible marketing support and personal tutoring in their own profile and their own marketing potential, not just of themselves, but the club, the team, etc. It's a big dimension. Commercial partners are invited into The training centres now on particular meet the squad days, meet the players. They watch training sessions and they engage with the players afterwards. And it's a highly profitable business, and it of course engages um, the commercial partners in a much closer sense of belonging and togetherness with the team, and it fosters better deals and longevity of deals. Overnight stays are typical within this scenario, and major corporate presentation spaces, typically press areas and sponsorship lounges, are significantly enhanced to allow the corporate engagement to thrive. So, a wraparound whole player development, commercialization, and a relentless pursuit of the marginal gains. Now let's take a look at elite rugby union in the UK. Starting with participation generally, if you compare this to football, football at all levels, right down to grassroots, at any one time has about 2.1 million people active, whereas rugby has only a tenth of this number. Financially, there's a big gap as well. A typical Premiership rugby club has a 6.4 million a year salary cap. This is to try and keep the clubs from overspending. Of course, this bears no relationship to even an individual player's yearly salary in the Premier League. You look at Erling Haaland and De Bruyne there. So let's look at the overall income of rugby union over a 10-year period. Well, broadly speaking, things were trending upwards until COVID hit, of course, in 2020, 2021. Hospitality, the blue bars, took a complete void, but has trended upwards since. However, 2020 was pretty much a peak for the pale grey broadcast and the red sponsorships, which have struggled clearly thereafter. In fact, broadcast revenues have actually dipped. Clubs are in particular trouble or two to the point of administration. Wasp, Worcester and London Irish went into administration. That's pretty damning for Premiership clubs. So let's look at these incomes and why the clubs at that level would be struggling. Well, for a total RFU revenue, £221 million, 90% of that comes from Twickenham. Only 10% is contributed by Premiership and clubs and community across the board. Twickenham, of course, hosts the Six Nations and the Autumn Internationals, and a couple of other games, and it hosts, of course, concerts. But 90% of the 221 million comes from Twickenham, and 78 million of that is hospitality. Hospitality, of course, is a big driver on top of basic ticket sales, and Twickenham can now achieve this scale of income due to recent expansions. They have the South Stand, but they recently expanded 6 stories of hospitality, catering, banqueting, and non-match day services like events and exhibitions. And this now delivers a much, much stronger business case for the RFU. Ticket prices have always been extremely solid, of course, because of the scarcity of the events, and the hospitality itself is priced quite at a high point, and it's relatively traditional. There is a range of rooms throughout the south and the east stands, and it's a good price point with a good return on investment. However, you look at the Premiership clubs, and only 3 clubs, Leicester, Northampton and Gloucester, would have actually been financially viable without the continuous backing of their wealthy owners. Salaries, of course, are a big part of this. They're not massive compared to Premier League football. Fly halves are at the top of the tree. Hookers are at the lower end. It's not a particularly big diversity between the two, and some of the key star players maybe just top over the 200,000 mark. It's all about attendance, though, and ticket price. If you look at the average attendance for the top 10 Premier League Premiership rugby clubs, we're seeing a very sad set of numbers there. We have a couple in the 20s, but we're seeing a couple of clubs there below 10,000 attendances average. It's surprising as to why this is, because rugby is incredibly a dynamic game. It has a very regular scoring profile, and there's a complete level of risk and opportunity. In the last 5 years, a different club has won it every single year. So anybody can beat anybody. And what more dynamic sport could you possibly want? So, conclusions. Why is rugby union in England struggling so much? Well, to be honest, it's mystifying. Now let's look at women's football in the UK. Women's football is a success story. It's looking good. It's remarkable, really, that only about 100 years ago, FA actually banned women's matches, and this wasn't really lifted until 1972. So the boost and the growth of the women's game we're seeing is a relatively recent phenomenon. Of course, it's been fantastically helped by the creation in 2010 of the Women's Super League, and then subsequent successes, fourth in the Women's World Cup in 2019. We win the Euros in 2022, which was really was a turning point, and that quality of team made the final in 2023. That 2022 European win increased the number of girls playing football by 56%, and it's held strong. 77% of schools now offer girls equal access to football. Why that's not 100% is beyond me, but it's going in the right direction anyway. Attendances are generally trending upwards. Typically, they are growing steadily. There are some outliers in that. Some of the major games, such as for Arsenal versus Tottenham, had 47,000 fans. The Champions League match against Real Madrid had more fans than the men's Champions League final. So there's some pretty big stats when it gets to be good big games. Generally, across the Women's Super League, attendances you'll see here are sort of 9,000-10,000 average for the top 5 clubs. Arsenal's a bit of an outlier. We'll come back to that. And then sort of 4,000 to 5,000 to 3,000 for the others. But these are all growing. They're looking to change the Women's Super League structure from 12 clubs to 18 clubs, which sounds like a pretty good idea to enrich the game schedule. But I'm not quite sure the sport has the depth to sustain that. At the moment, the Super League has 12, the Women's Championship has 11, and there are only 2 regional 12-club zones propping that up. So to make a Super League of 18 might be a step too far at the moment, but it's a healthy ambition. So let's just look at these attendances and what's going on with these. Well, a key factor here is the clubs that have the really big spikes in attendances are the ones that play their games at their home stadium. Particularly Aston Villa does this for almost half its games, and Arsenal is trending that way as well. Arsenal is particularly special because they are starting to play more and more games at the Emirates. They've decided to accept there might be a commercial premium to pay for that initially, to open up the stadium for less than full capacities. But the idea, it's one club, one team. They have a dynamic pricing system, and they're demonstrating an attitude to the women's game by playing at the main stadium. And for the big games, this is rewarded with some exceptional attendances. Aston Villa, as mentioned, have actually created the phrase "our home" and stated that for the 24-25 season, Villa Park will become the team's main stadium. Other initiatives already have dedicated stadiums, such as the 7,000 capacity Joy Stadium with Man City, and Brighton have recently declared an intention to build a bespoke 10,000 seat women's stadium in their dedication to the sport. So average revenues are reflecting this steady growth, up to 68 million. Now, of course, it's a long way from the Premier League, but then the Premier League is the richest football league in the world, so it's understandable. And the salaries of the managers and the top players are to some extent reflecting that. You can see here Serena Wiegman and Gareth Southgate, again, tenfold difference, and obviously dramatically different from the top players. But the women's game is growing in the right direction, and particularly so because they've just signed and created the Women's Professional Leagues Limited, and they have a new broadcast sponsorship deal. If you were to look at relative earnings, then obviously the Premier League in yellow. If you look at the dot 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 dot, that's just my own extrapolation as to where this might well go if that particular profile just continues and continues to 2030, and a very different profile along the bottom of this. But if you just change the scale of that and just look in a bigger scale at the Women's Super League versus the Rugby Football Union and the way those particular incomes are trending, RFU at 200 million, Women's Super League at 68. But with the new deal and the increasing attendances and popularity, if the RFU continues to struggle in a steady growth, we could well see by 2030 that the Women's Super League has actually overtaken men's rugby. So conclusions, it's growing. New broadcast deal will bring it to the attention of many more people, which will drive real-time live attendances. There's a debate about whether you stay at home in your main stadium and live with the pitch wear and tear and the scheduling implications of that, but have one brand, one team, one venue, or you completely build a bespoke women's stadium that is geared to suit the atmosphere and the crowd and the dynamics, and you have a guaranteed atmosphere, dedicated home, and more scheduling flexibility. Both, though, are positive for the sport. So conclusions, it's looking good. But where are you going to play your games? Okay, a quick little look at AI. We touched on AI at the previous speech, and it's growing, as you can see in the media every single day. AI platforms are becoming mainstream. It's an absolutely integral part of what's happening on your mobile phone, and more so in your daily working life. In our world as designers, we're still plagued by the demon of unrealistic AI, and to some extent the lack of credibility that these sorts of images bring to our professional creativity. If you were to type in to various programs such as Easy Peasy AI or Midjourney, you could type in 2 or 3 word prompts looking for futuristic stadiums, and you get some pretty crazy imagery. I think I've talked before about the sheen of unreality that these images have, sort of the glossiness and the shine, and you start to pick it up. If you're not picking up the craziness of the architecture itself, you start to spot the telltale signs that it's an AI rather than a proper design. But you can certainly, in seconds, get some pretty mad designs. Here's that Arsenal 80,000 as a work of 30 seconds, and so on and so on. Some of them, here's PSG's new stadium, are crazier than others. And some of them don't stand scrutiny for more than a couple of seconds, as you can see the flat shelves of viewing on the right hand side of this. Yeah, personal favourite. But there is a lot of convincing AI out there, and we do need to be vigilant in protecting true creativity. You can type in more prosaic command structures, and you can get something that is relatively convincing as a design. And if you wanted to test initial ideas, it's quite tempting to go down this line. But I think we've found pretty quickly that they don't stand any scrutiny, and may be all right just for a materialistic investigation or a stylistic investigation, but they're not proper and they're not real. and in most cases, not particularly attractive either. So, how is this policed? That's the key point. Well, surprisingly, um, China, who is much maligned for not protecting IP, is actually one of the leading countries in protecting against AI. Situation that this has come from social media and particularly abuse and trolling of platforms such as TikTok, and they are now employing AI to look for AI. So basically, if there's an AI bot running, they will run programs to spot the AI. This is actually quite a positive. We welcome this. Of course, it's the hackers and the AI systems are constantly trying to work around that policing. It's a looping system, but it's good to know that AI tracking and AI policing is gathering pace. So there you have it. That's a wrap up of some of the major sports in the UK, and look forward to speaking to you next time.